A Cricketing View, an irregular podcast about cricket and other things. Hello and welcome to a new episode of A Cricketing View podcast. Today's episode is about a book which my friends Abhishek Mukherjee and Arunabha Sengputa have written about one partnership in one test match. It's called Sachin and Azhar at Cape Town, and it's about their double century stand in the Cape Town Test, which started when India were 58 for 5 at risk of being routed in the series. Harsha Bhogle wrote a foreword for the book, and in the foreword he writes, "Far too often we who cover cricket don't place it in the perspective of a wider world. If anything, our vision has narrowed. Society and politics seem distant neighbors of sport, but in reality they are close cousins. And nowhere is this more visible than in South Africa, the setting that the two cricket lovers with a view of the world beyond cricket have chosen to place this book in. It was the place to be in the 90s. Cricket started with hope and ended with brief despair, but it was at all times a mirror to a ravaged society looking for sustenance. Arunab and Abhishek, the numbers men with a flair for words, sensitive, history loving writers, have attempted a mammoth task, and in doing so, look at South African cricket in larger context. If anything, the game there has hollowed since, but only the future can tell us if this was a necessary weeding out of one culture and the planting of another. That's quite an introduction to your book, Abhishek. In the book, you have an account of how the idea of the book came about. But how did it really come about?
Basically, we have been discussing this innings for some time. And whenever the great partnerships or innings are discussed, these somehow never make it to the top. And yet, I mean, these happen together simultaneously and in the same, almost in the same session. They were playing with each other. See, what we see is in most major partnerships, especially when a side is under pressure, one person takes charge, the other person plays a support act. But in this case, we saw a counterattack from both ends. This has worked for a short period of 15 minutes or so, but to sustain it for 2 hours and against a fast bowling attack like this, and after losing 15 wickets in the series for about 225 runs or something like that, to start an onslaught from there and to pull it off, I think that is very special. I'm leaving the occasion and everything aside. Just the quality of the partnership, the audacity of the onslaught, and the fact that I think that made it very special. And if you look uh, deeply, you'll find almost nothing written on this. I mean, neither books nor the newspaper coverage is not very great. You'll see a couple of YouTube videos, and internet coverage, especially in India, was in its early days. So there's virtually no coverage of. So actually, we Arnav and I had been discussing this for some time, that had this been played in England or played by an Englishman, or I mean, two Englishmen, there would have been at least, I mean, there would have been volumes written on this, and we saw that exactly. Michael Atherton's innings came roughly at the same time. I think today is an anniversary, or yesterday was an anniversary. So we have seen how many pieces you'll find written on that, sprawled across the internet. So we felt actually something needed to be done about this. And the rest, basically, whether one partnership deserves a book, we were discussing short phases of cricket, and he suggested that we may come up with a book on this topic, on 2 hours of cricket, and build a story around it.
Aruna, there is a tradition of this kind of writing in England and Australia, isn't it? I mean, you have a sort of a brief review of the literature at the beginning of the book. What is the motivation for this type of writing in those pictures? Is it just that they are trying to, memorialize a great event, or is there something more that they're trying to achieve?
Uh, First of all, I wouldn't say there is a kind of a tradition for this. There have been a few books written on partnerships, and the most famous is probably Ted Allison's innings, which was very fast and very counter-attacking innings from low in the order. and that was played in a county match, and John Arlott wrote a book on it. And when Abhishek and I were discussing about some of the innings in the past and this innings, this partnership came about, we thought that if that particular innings deserved a book, that particular phase of play after lunch that deserved a book, this innings, if played by a couple of Englishmen, this partnership, that would definitely have been made into a book. And yes, in England, we have certain books like this on a match, maybe on a partnership. Only the Ted Alliston's innings comes to mind. There have been books on matches: 1926 Oval Test, 1963 the Lord's Test. Alan Ross wrote a classic on it. But when you come to Australia, there was again a first class innings for first class last wicket partnership that was again written with a very prosaic title, and I'm not saying that because it's all in the book, but partnerships are generally, I mean, not that much written about. So this tradition is not there, but this definitely deserved a book. We have seen books like Ponsford and Woodfull and Hutton and Washbrook, or say Rhodes, Hurst and Rhodes. But these were about people who forged a partnership through their careers. But in one particular match, it is very rare to find a book like this. But this definitely needed to be written about, as Abhishek said that it was a phase of play in which there was counter attack from both ends, from an impossible, near impossible position, and against one of the greatest bowling attacks assembled. And secondly, the setting with Nelson Mandela in the stands, and this was about a friendship tour with back-to-back series played between India and South Africa, two sides who had never played before the isolation years, and it was. And these countries are linked in so many different ways. So all that has been talked about in this book.
I know of books about sobers hitting sixes. I think there are multiple books about that episode.
Sobers, six sixes of sobers. Yes, that's yeah, one over, and there were two books written about them by the same person.
Yeah.
And the first one about the over itself, and second one kind of a mystery about what happened to the ball and what happened after that. Richie Beno wrote A Tale of Two Tests, which is one was the tied test, definitely 1960-61 Brisbane, and the second one at Manchester the following season against England, which was another classic test. So these two together was made into one book. So there are some certain books in this regard, but what I would say, there is plenty of scope, plenty of phases of play to be written about, plenty of matches to be written about. Because if you ask me, the unit of cricket is a match. It's the match. It's the match which is the event. It is a career. Yes, if you write a biography, a career makes sense. But when you are talking about the cricketing action, it is the match, and like action happening, the battle between bat and ball, and a partnership like that is like a battle within the entire the bigger battle. One book I have forgotten to mention was the Ashes, the first test for the Ashes, the one that gave rise to the birth of the Ashes. That particular book has been made into more or less a detailed ball by ball analysis. And also, John Arlott wrote another one about the 1877 Ashes, the 1877 Test match, the first ever Test match. So all these books are there, but there are plenty of other dramatic moments of
Yeah.
cricket which should be made into books.
One book that was written on partnerships, I would say it was more of a booklet by Stephen Chalk on that Sutcliffe and Holmes's 555 run partnership. I mean, even though it was not the largest book, it was still a Stephen Chalk masterpiece, you can call it.
Yes, it was by Stephen Chalk. So even though it was a leaflet compared to his other books that he has written,
Mhm.
even then he has more substance and more style in it than
Yes.
maybe the life's work of most of the authors put together.
I could think of like two adjacent genres of cricket books. What you've done is different in specific ways and interesting ways from those. But the first is the tour diary, which both players and journalists who cover tours, right? Rahul Bhattacharya's tour diary of India's tour of Pakistan in 2003-4, that season, I think, is an example. And David Fritz's review of the 1981 Ashes. I think it was titled what Botham rekindles the Ashes. That's a much more common genre, and the other is a book like the one Sunil Gavaskar would produce, like One Day Wonders or something like that, which was not really a memoir of his career, but a memoir of a tournament or a period of his his career. But what you're doing is something different, where you're using you're using this one specific event to tell a story of a period, of a historical period. The most interesting figure in this book, I think, Abhishek, is Paul Adams. And I found his thoughts in this book to be particularly interesting. How willing were these players to actually discuss this with you? Well, how did they receive it when you put this idea to them, Abhishek?
Lance Kusner and Paul Adams, they were happy to answer some questions, the questions we asked. And then Ganesh was another very helpful person. We reached out to G. Vishwanath, who covered that series, a very senior journalist. And he told us things we never knew, especially regarding the Durban cloud level, how the feedback he got from local, how the altitude of the cloud affected the swing, and things like that. I mean, we got really sick, and they were actually, all of them were very helpful. Some of them were not. I mean, obviously we couldn't use their quotes, but yeah. And Arunava, I think, had already talked to Clive Rice a few years ago and the Living Circus.
So your story begins essentially at the start of the second test, but you sort of situate it in, let's call it what it is, the disaster of the first test. Like India were bowled out for 166, and South Africa were bowled out twice for, I think, if I'm not wrong, below 250 or some 250 or thereabouts. It was almost entirely seen in terms of the limits of India's batting. That was all. Like there was no the Indian team was basically the Indian batting. There was no other part to the Indian team which played any role in the evaluation or in the story of the contest. Right? But with today's eyes, like between the three of us, we know that it's basically the the lack of bowling depth which basically cripples a batting lineup. So it is. Do you think that India's batsmen in that era got a raw deal and what was sort of harshly judged because of this obsession with batting, Abhishek?
First of all, 1996, India was not a strong batting side. There were only two senior batsmen. The others, Dravid Lakshman and Ganguly, had just come into the side. Raman had been there, but he was never a regular. And India had been promoting using Mungia as opener. They had been trying with various options. So the batting was not settled at all at that point. In fact, throughout the first half of the 90s, other than Sidhu and to some extent Manjrekar, India never had a strong had never had a consistent top order going. So what when we think of a strong batting line, it was not actually there. Now about bowling. Uh, as we have shown, Srinath and Prasad were about as far any two of the, maybe not as they took more wickets than Donald and Pollock, I think, in the season. But while they were not as good. It was the support cast that made the difference. So what happened was, even in this test, I think in the first innings, South Africa lost 7 wickets. One of them was probably a run out. I'm talking from memory. And Srinath took three, Prasad took three, and there was nothing. So this was the story even in the first test. The two of them got the wickets, and the lack of depth in the pace bowling attack was what hurts. Now, South Africa, their two new ball bowlers were Donald and Pollock. Once they were through, there was no respite for the Indians. So the Macmillan and Klusner were there. They were fantastic bowlers. And the worst bit is Macmillan, Klusner, and Pollock could also bat, and they didn't have a long tail like India. So yeah, it was numbers 8 to 11 of the two sides that made the difference. The top order, I mean, South Africa did not do well either in either innings of at Durban. So had there been a potent third seamer, a world-class third seamer, the way South Africa had, I don't know. Maybe India would not have won at Durban, but at least it would not have been a 329 run margin. Maybe it would have been much less.
Arunabh, when I think back to that 1996-97 Durban test, I always then think back to that same test 10 years later in 2006-7, when India batted first, made 249, and South Africa were batting on, I think it was on the second day. And I still remember, I don't remember a lot of commentary, but I still remember this one comment from Pat Simcox. He looked at the ground, looked at the conditions, and he looked at Srishant bowl like three balls, and he said anything could happen here. And South Africa were bowled out for 84. So perhaps that 166 was not, it was not quite the sort of the cultural currency given to that, and then the reputations which were constructed out of that were perhaps not did not have cricketing merit to the extent that we seem to think that they do.
I mean, no matter what the condition, unless it is totally unplayable 166, I mean, there is hardly any scope to justify that. I mean, they were like bowled out for really ridiculously low scores. But at the same time, as Abhishek pointed out, that India had Srinath and Prasad, and two excellent bowlers in those conditions. And you must remember that they, like South African bowlers, had been born and brought up in those conditions. And even if they're of equal quality, like Srinath showed in India that he could be actually a more potent threat in India because he was more used to these conditions. Like he did win the series out there, and even in the first test in Ahmedabad, he just ran through the South African side in '96. Now, but the problem was after these two. I mean, Dota Ganesh has been an excellent help to us. I mean, but at the same time, he was not in that category um, when it comes to bowling. And if you look at the previous series that India played in England, Srinath and Prasad, that was Prasad's debut series, and Srinath had just taken over as a spearhead. And the first change was Pras Mambre. And uh, Azhar did not have enough confidence to give him the ball, even on a really seaming wicket at this Edgbaston, where every batsman was struggling against the seamers except for Nasir Hussain and Tendulkar. Now, with that particular, and I think in the first test, David Johnson also played, right? Jake? In the first test, it was David Johnson.
Here at Durban?
Yes, the Durban, or was
yes,
it?
I think so. Because
Yeah,
this was Ganesh's debut.
yeah. So I mean, yeah. So the support bowling, if you compare Klusner and Macmillan, no, Donald and Pollock taking a breather, and Klusner and Macmillan coming in, that means that no batsman had any respite. One of the reasons that Sachin and Azhar did well in counter attacking is that I don't think there was any other option. Like playing a waiting game is not possible in South African conditions against such a lineup. But if you take the Indian bowlers, it was not that. I mean, you play off the first two, and then you have quite a like smooth run after that, and that was even more apparent in the next tour in 2002. 2001, 2002, that tour, in which there was incredibly difficult conditions, and India went in with two seamers, and before lunch it was Kumble and Harbhajan bowling in tandem. That so yeah, when you say that those that generation of batsmen have been a bit judged a bit harshly, yes, because people tend to judge how many victories they have been part of, but it is basically a team game with 22 contributions, and it is a complex result of all these 22 contributions. So uh, the batsmen cannot win matches abroad just through their batting if there is no support uh, from their bowlers.
Again, still sticking to that batsman and bowlers point. See, a few months after this test match, India were bowled out for 81 at Bridgetown. Now they were chasing 120. West
Yes.
Indies' bowling attack, if I remember correctly, was Ambrose, Bishop, Rose, probably Dillon. I think Dillon was the fourth. India had three seamers, Prasad, Kuruvilla, and Ganesh. They didn't have Srinath. Now, if Srinath had played, India would have been chasing much less than 120. I'm sure of
Yes.
this, much less than 81 as well. The test could have been won if India had a proper out and out fast bowler. The mismatch was in bowling, not batting.
Yes, and that was apparent when Franklin Rose and Mervyn Dillon, they added a whole lot of runs. That was basically the difference, in the third innings.
Mhm.
And that was because there was no out and out fast bowler to really get through the tail.
Yeah. Abhishek, in the book, you guys draw a very nice contrast in the styles of Azharuddin and Tendulkar. And when I was reading the book, it sort of occurred to me that Azharuddin was probably the last of a style of batsman who no longer exists in the 21st century. This was a player who would use a light bat and would have to really hit the ball to hit it to the boundary. And that kind of player has been completely supplanted by modern players who use heavy bats and
Yes.
who play a lot of check drives, who play a lot of punches, who play a lot of you rely a lot on timing and on meeting the ball in the right time rather than really really hitting the ball hard. And Azharuddin was sort of unique in that he would really really hit the ball hard. uh, and that sort of in your description, every time you describe a, an over or a spell or something like that contrast comes through very very strongly. I think it's worth reflecting on Azharuddin a little bit right now.
I think there were two modes of Azhar. One
Yeah.
that we usually, I mean, today's fans, mostly 80s fans, 90s fans, today's fans, remember his why was his wristy elegance. That is there. I mean, Lakshman, I don't know which one of the two was better. That's purely subjective. But the other aspect was outrageously angry kind of Azhar. That came out when he hit through the off. There was nothing, there was rarely anything soft about his offside shots. And then there were moments when he stepped out and hit over the top. Now these were, I mean, even these could be classified into two parts. One that he hit during the test matches. So that was usual. He stepped out against the spinners. He lofted them. But in one days, if you remember, after sometime after the 40 over mark, around 42, 43, he would signal for probably some sort of slog special bat. That happened in every ODI. So once that came out, he would hit anyone. And when he hit them, they stayed hit. I mean, you've seen cricketers in recent past play with heavy bats, but this was completely different. brute power and timing, and that those leg side flicks didn't happen in the slogovers. I mean, they were. It's very difficult to describe the full swing. It was not never what do you say, grammatically correct. It came from second slip, third slip. It still landed on his left shoulder, but the shot went straight. It's very difficult to describe unless you see it on video or see it live.
People often connect Azhar with Lakshman, and that is very natural because they were both very, very graceful on-site players and very risky, and both came from Hyderabad, so they often make this comparison. But if you just take off that on-site play, I don't think there was much in common between the two. Like even on the offside, Lakshman developed into that caressing player. His drives or his steers all would be caressed through the offside, excellently placed and played with grace. Azhar, on the leg side, he was an artist. On the offside, his bat speed was phenomenal, and there was always that kind of hint of a kind of a grammatical mistake which always put his fans at the edge of their seats. Like he could get out, but most often he didn't. Like he managed to bring them off. And when he actually aimed for the stands, he just threw everything into it. His There was this back lift, his bat speed, and the follow through. So yeah, it was the kind of batting that we don't see too much nowadays.
But you, Abhishek, I don't know, you point to an inflection point in Azharuddin's career, or at least what you notice as an inflection point in Azharuddin's career, which is in the series before this one, when Azharuddin got hit, I think, on the forearm, and there was all this talk beginning at that time where his position was under pressure. And there was sort of an element of him lashing out in a few of his innings after that, where he would just, you know, go after the bowling. I mean, he was no longer really constructing an innings or trying to, play himself in and get, you know, play the conventional, how should I put it, play the conventional middle order batsman's innings. He was out there to murder the bowling. And you point out the period, that 100 he made at Eden Gardens, as a point where you noticed a change in him, which was sort of not, which was a shift from sort of the mild mannered artist of the early 90s and the 80s.
Yes, it's not that he hadn't gone for runs immediately, even before that. For example, the first shift came towards the early 90s when he went to New Zealand and then England as the captain,
Yeah.
and he played some fabulous innings there. And even Bishan Singh Bedi, who was infamously the coach at the time, he also said that I have seen Azhar play equally good innings, but they were a lot slower, lot more test match type. And here he is going really, really fast. He is scoring really fast. Even the Adelaide 100 that he scored in 91-92 series, the only time he actually clicked in that series, that was also a very quick scoring innings. But what happened in that Eden test in just before that, India had played the semi-final in at the Eden during the World Cup, and Azhar had been roundly booed because most of the people had come to the conclusion post facto that he had taken a wrong decision, and India had bowled fielded first, and that's why they had lost. And that was a chaotic match with bottles thrown in and all that. And Azhar had been roundly booed, and I don't think he forgot that. And it was quite evident that he didn't forget that because Azhar had a very honeymoon type of relationship with Eden. He always enjoyed batting there. Even against England in '93, he had scored a century, and a huge century at that. He had been totally, there was a lot of applause for that. But when he walked back that day with his forearm injury, one thing happened that in the dressing room, we hear that in VVS Lakshman's autobiography, it is written that I think the coach Madan Lal, he questioned that why he had actually come in. Why didn't he continue? And Azhar didn't take very kindly to that. And so when he returned, he just went for it. He just went for the bowling. He kept playing strokes, and it was also kind of the immaturity of Lance Klusner in that particular innings. It was his first test, and he kept pitching short, and Azhar kept playing those strokes, and he kept hooking. And they came off, and when he reached his 100, he just didn't raise his bat. He just didn't acknowledge the crowd. He just the bat remained hanging from his from his hand, and he just the people were applauding like mad, like they had never seen batting like that. I mean, very rarely they had seen batting like that. 100 in those many balls, and I think 74 balls, and Azhar just stood there, didn't even acknowledge a single cheer. So that showed me that told me that Azhar had really changed at that particular moment. There was some transformation. He kept playing his shots after that, and in the second innings, you remember India was at a desperate situation, and the innings he played, he scored a 50 and he top scored in that innings. But some would say that it was an irresponsible innings, especially because he got out clashing to the slips. And but again, the very next test match, if you see the 160 odd that he made, that was a gem. That was on a difficult wicket, and he played a real gem. So it was a very productive period for him. But what I thought was, if he was batting in helpful conditions, or helpful in the sense that in conditions he was used to, he would play his normal game. But if it was slightly difficult for him, he would go after the bowling, try to make hay while the sun shines, sort of thing. And that was the way he batted most of
And
the late 90s.
that hey, well, the sunshines was really how I mean that sums up Azhar's career, because if you notice Azhar's career, he started with 300s on debut, then he lost, then he didn't get hundreds anymore. There was almost no hundred between that and 1990. I think he got one or maybe two in all those in that 5 year period. Then suddenly in New Zealand he got that 190 or so. In England he at Lords he probably got the best 100 of them all. And after that he got and after that he struggled in Australia, South Africa. Back home he again got runs. Here he scored 300s in 4 tests, and so on. You'll find Azhar scoring hundreds in clusters.
One of the wonderful things about the book is that it brings back all these memories. And I'll tell you the one shot of Azharuddin which has always stuck in my mind. And it's a shot from a one-day match, and it's a shot against Muralidharan. And Muralidharan in that period was really a master of giving Sri Lanka control in the middle overs. He used to bowl on a middle stump line to a 3-6 field. He used to have a ring of 3 on the leg side and then 3 on the boundary behind them. And on the offside, he would either have a ring of 3, or he would put the cover point back for someone who wants to hit a cover drive against him, against his break. And Azharuddin used to always try to play back to Muralidharan, and I still remember he used to play back, and then he used to play this inside out push into the covers for 1 to rotate the strike. And basically, when there's a picture, I don't have the picture now, but I've seen this picture, and there's a picture of him playing that shot, and basically all 3 stumps are exposed. He's playing back. His back foot is outside leg stump. His front foot is even further outside leg stump. And he's basically playing it like with a table tennis bat almost. And it's just a shot for 1. But that is the memory I have of Azharuddin. That he basically, when he batted according to his own rules, and there was an internal logic to his game which worked for him, which which got him to play from outside off stump to mid wicket, and which got him to play against the field almost as much as play against the bowling. But uh, and there's also sort of a, this, what you're saying about make hay while the sun shines. There's also, it's not just him being cavalier, right? It's also him being fearless. He's not really scared of being out.
When Azhar used to be in form, the number of times he exposed all three stumps. I mean, if someone had kept track of that, it would have been, I mean, it would have been really, really high. You would be scared. A fast bowler bowling, let alone spinner, fast bowler is bowling, Azhar would expose the stumps to hit the ball to cover point or something. And he would do it consistently. You could, on TV, you could see all three stumps, and then the bat came out of nowhere. For that
Yeah.
split second, you would have your heart in your mouth. I don't know how he did that, but he never hesitated doing that.
Aruna, I want to move to another part of the book. The book provides a very nice sort of statistical, I shouldn't say statistical, actually, it provides a very nice landscape of the cricketing record, in terms of, India's history, South Africa's history, the history of cricket in South Africa, the history of cricket against South Africa, the history of cricket against India. Uh, and one of the things you bring out is South Africa's propensity to produce all rounders, which in that particular side, obviously there was Pollock, Klusner, and Macmillan, but those were only three of a long line of all rounders. And did you ever get like a good answer as to why that was the case?
Yeah, if you look at the history of South African cricket, this all-rounder, this right from Jimmy Sinclair, the very first century hitter for South Africa, he
Yeah.
hit the first three centuries of South Africa, in fact. And then we have the great, like really, really great Aubrey Faulkner, whom no one talks about nowadays. He averaged 40 with the bat and 26 with the ball. He was leg spinning all rounder, one of the great googly bowlers. And then down the years, plenty of them, even Buck Lelewin, and there were others like Snook. Quite a lot of the googly bowlers could bat. Gordon White, and then down the years there were plenty of them. And the lost all-rounders like Mike Proctor, Clive Rice. And I had the opportunity of talking to Clive Rice, and quite a long interview. And I posed him this question about why do you think that South Africa has so many all-rounders? And his answer was like quite prosaic. I don't think he himself had an ready answer to that, but he thought about it on the spur of the moment. He said that, yeah, when you are batting, you are in the game, and then if you want to be in the game, you have to bowl. Like if you are batting and then standing in third man, you are not really contributing that much. So I think most of the people in South Africa want to contribute as long as they are on the field, and therefore we have all these all-rounders, which which makes sense from a like from the personal point of view of Clive Rice or from the personal point of view of different cricketers. But why this should be a national feature, I don't know about it. It's just that they have a lot of all-rounders and they have always had.
It's interesting. No, Abhishek, I'm putting this to both of you, and maybe Abhishek can go first. But it's interesting that the most recent, great South African side, which was like the best in the world, which is the late Smith years, and maybe the couple of years in the early to 2010s after that. That was a side made up of specialists largely. It had Jack Callis, who by then was basically a batsman, who bowled only occasionally. It had three bowlers, Markle, Steyn, and if they played Harris, then Harris, who were not really expected to bat. And it had Vernon Philander, who was capable with the bat, but not as good with the bat as say Pollock. You know, so is do you think that's a shift in the way South African cricketers are developing, or are we just noticing that because a lot of the South African call pack players are actually all rounders?
Yeah, I suppose that may be the case. I'm trying to think, even in recent past, there's no really all-time great all-rounder in the South African squad as well. I wonder what happened. I have come across an answer of sorts that was something I think Siddharth Monga wrote in Cricket Info, but that was to explain why India does not produce batsmen who can bowl. I mean, he was referring to the fact that net practices, I mean, batsmen bowling in the nets has now been replaced by throwdowns. But I don't think that is applicable to the South African scenario. I mean, I don't know how much that is applicable. But yeah, you're right. The concept of batsmen who can bowl or bowlers who can bat has definitely not is definitely not there as much as it used to be, say, 15 years ago in South African cricket. Interestingly, in some other countries, it has gone up. It's another thing that a lot of South Africans play for England these days. That may be one of the
Uh,
reasons, but
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I don't think that there is any possible answer to this other than the fact that they had to run out of them. Like they kept producing them like an assembly line. So sometimes some point of time they had to run out of the quality all rounders. But that's just aside. I Yeah, if you look at England, they do have a lot of them. But South Africa, yeah, Keshav Maharaj can bat. Warren Philander was good with the bat, decent with the bat. But after Sean Pollock, uh, I don't think we have that sort of all-rounder anymore. And Callis, as you said, he had almost become a batsman by the end of his career, like a specialist. He was always a specialist batsman, but he used to bowl less and less. So yes, that's a very interesting point.
the game has changed in towards wicket keepers becoming all rounders, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you compare Richardson with Quinton de Kock, or you compare More or Mongia with Dhoni or Pant, and the batting ability of today's keepers is compared to what it was in the 80s and 90s is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, even if somebody like Syed Kirmani, we thought he was a very combative batsman. Like even if you ask people now, they would say that he was always contributing. But if you take somebody like Dhoni, as you said, and Pant, I mean
Yeah.
that's a completely different ball game altogether.
Tim
Yeah.
Payne is the anachronism almost.
Yes. Even if you take Mark Boucher,
Yeah.
so he was not to that Quentin de Kock level. I mean, he was very good with the bat, but he was still, you could say that he was somewhat old-fashioned wicketkeeper in that respect, that he was not a genuine batsman if you look at his record properly. But yeah, de Kock, yeah, he's often the premier batsman of South Africa. It's the
Yeah.
same with
Yeah,
Rishabh Pant and Abhishek, and I have both said that he should be like touring as a batsman. I mean, if his keeping is not up to the level, I mean, he has proved himself as a batsman. And
Yeah.
every country, like if you take England, they have several of them who can uh, play as batsmen or play as both wicketkeeper and batsman.
Yeah. Why is that? Why is that just a quirk, or is there something in the way these teams are being organized, or something in the way the wicket keeping spot is being viewed nowadays that that is causing that? Because part of it has to do with a shift in selection, right? No team can afford, after Gilchrist, basically no team is able to afford a pure keeper without any consideration for how many runs the keeper will contribute. And I think that has shifted the way in which uh, keepers who want to be considered for the job think about their batting as well, isn't it? Abhishek, you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, see, Gilchrist. I would also bring Andy Flower into this. Flower Flower was actually not the trendsetter, but if you ask me, he was at least as good a batsman as Gilchrist, given his record as a specialist wicketkeeper, and I mean, the amount of pressure and responsibility he had to handle. But yes, since then, since Gilchrist came along, wicketkeepers around the world, teams around the world sort of started expecting more of their wicket keepers. Now that did not happen in one generation, but this is basically about well over a decade after Gilchrist's retirement and about 2 decades after Gilchrist's Test debut. So by now a new generation has emerged. I mean, with the notion, with the idea that the expectations on them are what are similar to what used to be from Gilchrist. They know that even if they cannot keep better than someone else, they at least can bat better than their rival, and we have seen that happen. I mean, in that generation, in before Gilchrist, we have seen that Stewart versus Russell confusion. Later, we saw Chris Reed having to battle with Matt Pryor. Before that, Jared Jones, and we have seen that happen. I mean, the better wicketkeeper having to fight with the better batsman. Now, the better wicket keepers know that they even have to compete with bats. So naturally, both ways, the better batsman and the better keeper both are raising the bar of their weaker suit. So right now, what do you call a better all-rounder? I think all-rounder can be used to describe wicketkeeper batsman. So now you'll find all-rounders in almost every team. I mean, even say the new teams, Afghanistan and Ireland, they have excellent wicketkeeper batsmen.
Yeah, and this is not really a modern phenomena of like wicket keepers losing their place to not so
Hmm.
good keeper but a better batsman, not a lot better batsman like George Duckworth and Leslie Ames. That was their story. Ames played a lot more because he was averaging 40 with the bat in Test cricket and scoring 100 first-class centuries. Um, I think it boils down to a problem of optimization. And how do you optimize your side? You have a set of skill sets, and you have this skill of wicket keeping and batting. And if you take a phenomenal wicket keeper who is not so good batsman, and if you take a good wicket keeper who is a genuinely good batsman, so which is a better combination? I think most teams have settled for the latter combination, which gives you more options and which is probably numerically superior. So uh, how much do you suffer when it is a difference between a not so good keeper and a genuinely very good keeper? And how much difference is there when it is a genuine batsman and a not so good batsman? And then I think the difference between the genuine batsman and not so good batsman is greater than the difference between a genuine keeper and not that good a keeper.
I think my theory about this the decline of all rounders. I mean, Ben Stokes is the obvious exception, and they say that Chris Wokes is an exception, but I think Chris Wokes is very much a home specialist, and he's very good in England.
Mm,
But my view of this has come down to this, that in an era where so many teams have a lot of bowling depth. Every team now can play three genuine wicket taking bowlers, and the fourth bowler is really, really good. In such an era, there is a tendency towards specialists, both with batting and bowling. If we ever get back to an era where, apart from one or two teams, all other teams have, at most one or two genuine wicket taking bowlers, you'll see a return of the, bowling all rounder or the batting all rounder. You'll see, like, players like Andrew Hall or players of that type making a comeback and pop or Jacob Oram, so that type of player coming back and into the test teams. Uh, but I want to conclude by taking you back, both of you back to this observation which Harsha Bhogle made in his foreword, and he says, if anything, the game there in South Africa he's talking about has hollowed out since the late 1990s. But only the future will tell us if this was the necessary weeding out of one culture and the planting of another. So, Abhishek, do you want to elaborate on that, and then we'll give Arunabh the last word.
I mean, the measures may seem harsh. It may seem overcompensation, but then again, in some cases, it may also seem soft because
You're talking
uh,
about. I'm sorry. You're talking about affirmative action, right?
yes, some cases the measures may seem harsh, but when put into perspective about against what happened in South Africa for say for decades or maybe over a centuries before until 1990 happened, 1992 happened. I think what happened since 1992 pales into comparison. Whatever you do, you cannot overcompensate for that. There's too much had happened till that point for a quota to overcompensate that or anything to overcompensate that. It's unlikely. So we have discussed that in the book at length about what South Africa used to be like till that point. Yes, corrective measures have been taken. Some would say they are too harsh. Some would even say they are too soft because while Mandela wanted the change to happen, he didn't want to. He didn't want things to rush at a drastic pace. There are some South Africans who think, contemporary South Africans who think Mandela might could have been harsher. But yeah, I think whatever is happening right now is probably not overcompensating. That's my personal opinion.
So, Arunabh, one thing I always think about when thinking about inequality, is that we sort of think of inequality in terms of snapshots in time, whereas inequality actually operates over time, and it operates over time in the way compound interest operates. And essentially, it seems to me that the black community and the broader colored community in South Africa is trying to make up in 25, 30 years uh, an inequality which has been built up over nearly a century now, actually more than a century now. And so it seems to me, at least, that the affirmative action is necessary, even if it at times may appear unfair in the short term.
Yeah, South Africa is very, very complex. It's not only the blacks and whites, but there are multiple shades of color.
Yeah.
So, if I want to put things in perspective, what was the major injustice done to them? Just one example, way before apartheid came into the picture. In 1913, the entire country was segregated. 92.7% of the land in the country was reserved for the whites, who made up 20% of the population. 7.3% of the land was for the rest of them, who made up 80% of the population. So, and that was mainly because there were the two white factions, the Afrikaners and the English, who were competing, and they had a huge power struggle, and the blacks were basically used as bargaining chips. Now, with a history like that, when forget being exposed as cricketers, they were dehumanized. Like, it was a miracle that they could even aspire to play cricket, and some of them did play cricket to a great level and became great cricketers, though not in the international scene, except for Basil de Oliveira. It was a miracle because the basic way of life, the amount of dehumanization of the community, that was like incredible, and that continued till the 1980s, early 90s even. Apart from that, there was the Indian community who were considered to be the Asiatic curse, who didn't have their citizenship before 1960s, 1961, and they were not even allowed to go into the Orange Free State, like cross from Natal into Orange Free State for more than 24 hours. If they had to do it, they had to get a particular permit. They were the colored community, and things are still quite like colored is a mixed race, and things are still pretty confusing for them, because at that time they were too black to be considered as whites, and now they say they are too white to be considered as blacks. So it is really, really confusing there, and all this imbalance that has taken place, there is no easy solution. So they are still looking for solutions, and the quota system is one of the measures they have taken, and this which has resulted in a lot of heartburn, like Kevin Peterson's case, if you see, or the Kolpak people opting for that. And yeah, if you see Temba Bavuma, he has played say 40 test matches, 67 innings, and he has just 100, and he averages 30. So you'd say that it is not fair for a lot of better cricketers, but there is no easy solution to all the imbalance that has taken place, and whether this will work or not, they things will balance out in the end, but it is still in the early phases. So considering what has gone on in the past, tremendous cricketers, no one knew about them, and then they have there has been this change of scenario, change of power, and there is a lot going on in the country which is totally not desirable, like the farm murders and everything. In this context, yes, we should take the entire big picture into the consideration, and whatever steps have been taken, they have been taken with some amount of thought behind it, and those were necessary to undo certain of the damages, certain imbalance that has been like inflicted in the past. So as you said, it's not just a snapshot. We have to consider the entire time period to see what has gone on and what is the situation currently, and whether there will ever be a like balanced society, a peaceful society, and with equal opportunity for all. It remains to be seen, but it will take time. It will take time. It's not so easy, and just saying that it is not the proper way, I don't think anyone has the answer. So no one is in a position to take a proper call whether this is the correct way or not.
Thank you. I'd just like to conclude by saying that Abhishek and Arunabh have written a book about a partnership between two great players, which took place 23 years ago. It might as well be a partnership from a different India, because we cannot imagine with today's eyes what watching the Indian team play abroad in the late 90s was like. Today we live in an India where the BCCI is the richest board in the world. India have beaten Australia in Australia. They won a World Cup. They're the best, one of the best teams in the world, best resource team in the world. And all of these things make India, today's Indian team, a team from a different planet. It is to paraphrase Harsha Bhogle, a completely different culture today in Indian cricket compared to what it was in the late 90s.
Yeah, and the pace attack.
Yeah. Today's pace attack is
The pace attack
extraordinary.
that is, yeah, extraordinary, and there is no comparison what we had. We had some decent bowlers, but the amount of reserve that we have, bench strength, it's extraordinary right now.
And it doesn't look like that bench strength is going to fade anytime soon. Compared to where South Africa is, in the South Africa of the late 90s and South Africa of today, they have faced even more overwhelming changes, and they've faced, of course, the Kolpak drain. They are now a whole new generation of South Africans. If you think about it, South Africans who were 2 years old when Tendulkar and Azharuddin were playing that stand, and Adam Bakar took that brilliant catch to end Tendulkar's innings and end India's innings. They are now 25 years old. The fact that Abhishek and Arunabha have written this book about one stand is itself interesting, and it itself makes this book worth your attention. But I think the distance from which they are writing, a whole generation, a whole cricketing generation, actually multiple cricketing generations, adds to its value. And I think I'll conclude by thanking Abhishek and Arunabh. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you. And yeah, it was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.